From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Today is a bad day for tyranny and corruption. Today, we take to the streets in over 800 marches around the globe and demand common sense gun laws.
I have lived in South LA my entire life and have lost many loved ones to gun violence. This is normal. Normal to the point that I've learned to duck from bullets before I learned how to read.
I have a dream that enough is enough. And that this should be a gun-free world, period.
They have been called the mass shooting generation. From the 9-year-old granddaughter of Martin Luther King Jr. to survivors of the Parkland, Florida school shooting. More than 1 million people in Washington, around the country and the globe participated in the March for Our Lives, calling for gun control following the Valentine's Day massacre at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, which left 17 people dead, 14 students, 3 faculty. We'll air highlights from the historic Washington, D.C. rally, including 18-year-old Emma Gonzalez, who stood on stage for over 4 minutes in silence in what has been described as the loudest silence in the history of U.S. social protest.
Since the time that I came out here, it has been 6 minutes and 20 seconds. The shooter has ceased shooting and will soon abandon his rifle, blend in with the students as they escape, and walk free for an hour before arrest. Fight for your lives before it's someone else's job.
And more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. More than 1 million students, parents, teachers, anti-violence activists took to the streets Saturday in Washington, D.C., around the country and around the world in the March for Our Lives. The historic day of action was organized by the student survivors of the Valentine's Day massacre at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, where 17 people were killed, 14 students and 3 faculty. In Washington, D.C., youth from Parkland to Chicago took to the stage to decry the power of the National Rifle Association and the epidemic of gun violence in the United States. This is Trevon Bosley.
I'm here to speak on behalf of Chicago's youth who are surrounded and affected by gun violence every day. I'm here to speak for those youth who fear they may be shot while going to the gas station, the movies, the bus stop, to church, or even to and from school. I'm here to speak for those Chicago youth who feel their voices have been silenced for far too long.
More than 800 sibling marches were organized worldwide, including Seattle, Oakland, Denver, Salt Lake City, Dallas, Austin, Los Angeles, as well as marches in Mexico, Spain, Romania, Greece, Lebanon, Kenya, Hong Kong, and Thailand. This is student Sanchi Rohira speaking in Mumbai, India.
I'm here to support that march and say never again to gun violence. Not one more kid should die in their classroom.
We'll play more highlights from the historic March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C. after headlines. The March for Our Lives came as cell phone video has surfaced of one of the latest fatal shootings in the United States, a Harris County Sheriff's deputy killing a 34-year-old unarmed African-American man named Danny Ray Thomas in Houston. The cell phone video, obtained by the Houston Chronicle, shows the man wandering around the street with his pants at his ankles, appearing distressed and mumbling to himself. Family members say he's been suffering from depression since 2 of his children were killed in 2016. Deputy orders the man to stop, and then, as a passing car briefly obscures the video, the deputy fires 1 fatal shot, killing him. The video of the fatal police shooting in Houston comes as protests continue. Protesters demanding justice for another recent victim of gun violence, 22-year-old Stephon Clark, an unarmed African-American man who was killed by police officers outside his own home 1 week ago. On Sunday night, at a game between the Boston Celtics and the Sacramento Kings, the NBA players wore shirts featuring Stephon Clark's name and the words, "Accountability, we are one." The players also pre-recorded a video that played on the Jumbotron inside the stadium ahead of tip-off.
We will not shut up and dribble.
This is bigger than basketball.
Change can be uncomfortable. Change is necessary. We need to talk.
We need to act.
We matter.
We must unite.
Say his name. Stephon Clark.
Stephon Clark. We must unite.
The Sacramento police have still not explained why the officers muted their body cameras after they shot Stephon Clark 20 times. Meanwhile, in Maryland, a 16-year-old girl who was shot in the head at Great Mills High School in Maryland last week has died. Jaylin Willie was taken off life support after she was declared brain dead. She was shot by a fellow student, Austin Rollins, with whom authorities say she may have had a previous relationship. Experts say there are strong connections between domestic violence and gun violence. In a highly anticipated episode of 60 Minutes Sunday night, adult film star Stephanie Clifford, known as Stormy Daniels, told Anderson Cooper she signed a non-disclosure agreement promising not to talk publicly about her 2006 alleged affair with President Trump because she was scared about her and her daughter's safety. During the interview, which Trump's personal lawyer had tried to block from airing, Clifford recounted a threat she'd received in 2011 after she sold her story about the alleged affair to Bauer Publishing, which publishes In Touch magazine.
Parking lot, going to a fitness class with my infant daughter. I was taking, the seats facing backwards in the back seat, diaper bag, getting all the stuff out. And a guy walked up on me and said to me, "Leave Trump alone, forget the story." And then he leaned around and looked at my daughter and said, "A beautiful little girl, it'd be a shame if something happened to her mom." And then he was gone.
You took it as a direct threat?
Absolutely. I was rattled. I remember going into the workout class and my hands were shaking so much I was afraid I was going to drop her.
Did you go to the police?
No.
Why?
Because I was scared.
Clifford also says she spanked Trump with a magazine that has his face on the cover, that they had unprotected sex, and that Trump compared Clifford to his daughter Ivanka. Stephanie Clifford's interview Sunday night comes after model Karen McDougal also broke her non-disclosure agreement to speak publicly about her alleged affair with Donald Trump in 2006. A third woman, apprentice contestant Sumner Zervos, is suing President Trump for defamation after Trump called her a liar when she accused him of sexual assault. Multiple outlets are reporting Trump's legal team is in disarray after it was announced that two new lawyers, Victoria Tensing and Joe diGenova, will not join his legal team only days after their appointment was announced. diGenova is a former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia who's claimed Trump is being framed by FBI and Justice Department officials. Last Thursday, Trump's top lawyer, John Dowd, quit the legal team, reportedly resigning after Trump repeatedly ignored his legal advice and attacked Robert Mueller by name on Twitter. President Trump has signed a memorandum banning most transgender people from serving in the U.S. military. The new policy, signed Friday, comes after President Trump announced unexpectedly on Twitter last July he was banning all transgender people from U.S. military service. Transgender troops have sued the administration over the policy. A Pentagon spokesperson told the Washington Blade late Friday that the military, quote, will still comply with federal court rulings and continue to assess and retain transgender service members. The New York Times reports the Pentagon carried out its first-ever drone strike against alleged al-Qaeda militants in southern Libya over the weekend. The strike signals a possible expansion of the U.S. military involvement in Libya, which has previously been restricted to targeting alleged ISIS militants in northern Libya. In Afghanistan, at least 13 people were killed in a car bomb explosion outside a sports stadium in Lashkargah, the capital of Helmand province, on Friday night. Officials say all the victims were civilians. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the attack. In Egypt, voters are heading to the polls today for a presidential election in which incumbent President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is almost certainly expected to win. All of his challengers were barred from running except for one little-known candidate, Musa Mustafa Musa, who has said publicly he's not seeking to challenge al-Sisi. Former military general al-Sisi has launched a wide-ranging crackdown against human rights activists in Egypt, with reports of torture, enforced disappearances, mass arrests, and extrajudicial killings. European Union officials are warning the humanitarian crisis in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is growing more severe by the day, with nearly 8 million people facing severe food insecurity. Armed conflicts in multiple regions of the DRC are worsening as President Joseph Kabila refuses to step down more than a year after the end of his term. In Siberia, at least 64 people were killed when a fire tore through a shopping mall in the city of Karamovo Sunday. At least 16 people are still missing. Authorities say the death toll is likely to rise. In Paris, thousands of people marched Saturday to protest Turkey's military offensive against the Syrian Kurdish city of Afrin. This is protester Nursel Kilic.
The Turkish state has become an invading power because it is occupying the territory, one that is foreign to Turkey. They crossed the border. This territory is not only an autonomous Kurdish town, but at the same time, it is officially Syrian territory. So it's an occupying force, which is in Afrin. And what Turkey is trying to do right now is to eradicate a whole population, but not only a democratic and autonomous system, a new secular society model, which is starting to sprout in the very heart of the Middle East, and especially in Afrin.
The protests in Paris came as the Turkish military says it's taken full control of the city of Afrin. In Catalonia, protests erupted Sunday after German authorities detained the former Catalan president Carles Puigdemont after he entered Germany from Denmark. German authorities may now extradite him to Spain, where he's facing charges of sedition and rebellion after the Catalan government declared independence from Spain last October. His arrest in Germany comes after, on Friday, a Spanish court ruled 25 Catalan leaders will be tried for rebellion or disobeying the state. In Chile, thousands of people took to the streets of the capital, Santiago, for a national march for the right to housing Saturday. About 5,000 people protested real estate speculation and demanded the government provide more quality, affordable housing. In Canada, dozens of Indigenous youth and their allies were arrested protesting the expansion of Kinder Morgan's Trans Mountain pipeline, which would triple the amount of oil flowing from Alberta's tar sands to the coast of British Columbia. Among those arrested in Burnaby on Saturday were Green Party leader Elizabeth May and Parliament member Kennedy Stewart. More than 170 people have been arrested protesting the pipeline over the last week alone. Back in the United States, Republican lawmakers in Ohio have proposed a bill that would ban all abortions. The bill, HB 565, would also allow prosecutors to pursue criminal charges, including murder charges against patients and abortion providers. In Ohio, murder is punishable by the death penalty. Pro-choice advocates say the Ohio bill is part of a campaign by anti-choice extremists aimed at forcing the Supreme Court to reconsider its landmark Roe v. Wade decision of 1973. And in Oklahoma, teachers are tentatively planning to walk out of school statewide April 2nd unless lawmakers approve increases to their salaries. A recent report by the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows teachers in Oklahoma have the lowest average wages of any U.S. state. The proposed strike in Oklahoma comes on the heels of a historic teacher strike in West Virginia. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In a historic day of action, there were more than 800 protests on Saturday urging lawmakers to pass gun control. In Washington, D.C. alone, organizers say up to 800,000 people took part in the March for Our Lives, which was organized by students who survived the February 14th shooting massacre at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. In New York, another 150,000 people took to the streets. 85,000 rallied in Chicago, 55,000 marched in Los Angeles. Tens of thousands also rallied in Atlanta and Pittsburgh, and 20,000 people gathered in Parkland, Florida. Demands from the students include a ban on semi-automatic weapons that fire high-velocity rounds, a ban on accessories that simulate automatic weapons, the establishment of a database of gun sales and universal background checks, the closing of gun show and secondhand sales loopholes, to allow the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, to make recommendations for gun reform and raise the firearm purchase age to 21, and to change privacy laws to let mental health care providers communicate with law enforcement. Well, today we air voices from Saturday's March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C. Speakers at the march included survivors of the Parkland, Florida shooting, as well as young people from around the country who've been impacted by gun violence. We begin with Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School junior Cameron Caskey, who survived the school shooting on February 14th.
To the leaders, skeptics, and cynics who told us to sit down and stay silent, wait your turn. Welcome to the revolution. It is a powerful and peaceful one because it is of, by, and for the young people of this country. My name is Cameron Kasky. Since this movement began, people have asked me, do you think any change is going to come from this? Look around. We are the change. Everybody here is standing with the future of our society, and for that, I thank you. My generation, having spent our entire lives seeing mass shooting after mass shooting, has learned that our voices are powerful and our votes matter. We must educate ourselves and start conversations that keep our country moving forward, and we will. We hereby promise to fix the broken system we've been forced into and create a better world for the generations to come. Don't worry, we've got this. The people of this country now see past the lies. We've seen this narrative before. For the first time, the corrupt aren't controlling our story. We are. The corrupt aren't manipulating the facts. We know the truth. Shooting after shooting, the American people now see one thing they all have in common: the weapons. Politicians, either represent the people or get out. The people demand a law banning the sale of assault weapons. The people demand we prohibit the sale of high-capacity magazines. The people demand universal background checks. Stand for us or beware, the voters are coming. On February 14th, tragedy struck my hometown and my school, Marjory Stoneman Douglas High. Alyssa Al-Hadef, Scott Beagle, Martin Duque Anguiano, Aaron Feist, Jamie Guttenberg, Chris Hickson, Luke Hoyer, Kara Loughran, Gina Montaldo, Joaquin Oliver, Helena Petty, Meadow Pollock, Helena Ramsey, Alex Schachter, Carmen Schentrup, Peter Wang, and Nicholas Dworet all lost their lives in less than 7 minutes. And I saved Nicholas for the end because today is Nicholas's birthday. Nicholas, we are all here for you. Happy birthday. Their families endured great pain. Many others were injured, and thousands of young people, my classmates, were forced to become adults and were targeted as adults. We have to do this for them. We must stand beside those we've lost and fix the world that betrayed them. This doesn't just happen in schools. Americans are being attacked in churches, nightclubs, movie theaters, and on the streets. But we, the people, can fix this. For the first time in a long while, I look forward 10 years and I feel hope. I see light. I see a system I'll be proud of, but it all starts with you. The march is not the climax of this movement, it is the beginning. It is the springboard off of which my generation and all who stand with us will jump into a safer future. Today is a bad day for tyranny and corruption. Today, we take to the streets in over 800 marches around the globe and demand common sense gun laws.
I'm Maya, and I'm 16 years old. I'm here because I have been personally affected by the lack of gun control, and I believe guns have taken over the minds of individuals who want an easy way out of their dilemma. Chicago goes through this every day, and you don't realize how much of a toll it is taking on our city until you see it in our communities. You see it on someone you know. You see it on someone like me. Freshman year in high school, I wanted to get some things for the store for my mom because she was sick. I remember pulling on all these clothes and going out in 10 or so degree weather. It was so cold. Get to the store, grabbing all this stuff, thinking maybe she needs this, maybe she needs that, and finally getting into line. This guy in front of me all of a sudden gets upset because he didn't have enough money to pay for the things that he wanted to buy. He gets out of line and starts trashing the store, throwing everything over the floor, pushing carts, just making a fool out of himself. So finally, when I check out, I walk to the door and I'm ready to go when I hear a scream and a bang. I turn around and see he's grabbing all this stuff, pushing it into every crevice of his body, trying to grab as much as he can. When he finally turns to me, he comes towards me and I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't talk, I couldn't think. All I remember is seeing dark jeans coming towards me. He pulls out this silver pistol and points it in my face and said these words that to this day haunt me and give me nightmares. He said, said if you said anything, I will find you. And yet I'm still saying something today. Guns have long scared our children, corrupted our adults, and publicly silenced our government. Guns have become the voice of America, and the government is becoming more negligent by this predicament by the day. Join me in sharing my pain and my anger. Help us by screaming to the government that we are tired of crying for help to a group of people that have turned their backs on us, despite their reassurance of making our country safer.
16-year-old Maya Middleton from Chicago speaking at the March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C. We'll return with more voices of protest in a moment.
Everything, but what does it mean? It all means nothing. You don't stand up for something. And I stand up for you, self-respect.
I understand, ain't here to judge, just to take a stand. The greater plans, the creator's plan. Let's all rise like the day began. Reach out and touch with the Savior's hand. On rock we stand like his native land. Let the ways of love be the ways of man. These days we dance between love and hate. Don't know the date, so we stay awake. A knee we take for our soul's sake. New victory off of old faith. A president that chose for hate. We don't control our fate because God is great. When they go low, we stay in the heights. I stand for peace, love, and women's rights.
Stand Up for Something, performed by Andra Day and Common on the main stage at Saturday's March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. More than 1 million people in Washington, around the country, and around the world rallied Saturday for the March for Our Lives, calling for gun control following the Valentine's Day massacre at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School that left 17 people dead. We return to highlights from the youth-led rally in Washington. This is student David Hogg, who survived the shooting in Parkland.
96 people die every day from guns in our country, yet most representatives have no public stance on guns. And to that, we say no more. We are going to make this the voting issue. We're going to take this to every election, to every state and every city. We're going to make sure the best people get in our elections to run, not as politicians, but as Americans. Because this is not cutting it. When people try to suppress your vote, and there are people who stand against you because you're too young, we say no more. Now is the time to come together, not as Democrats, not as Republicans, but as Americans. Americans of the same flesh and blood that care about one thing and one thing only, and that's the future of this country and the children that are going to lead it. Now, they will try to separate us in demographics. They will try to separate us by religion, race, congressional district, and class. They will fail. We will come together. We will get rid of these public servants that only serve the gun lobby. And we will save lives. You are those heroes.
My name is Sarah Chadwick, and I'm a junior at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. This here, $1.05. When you take 3,140,167, the number of students enrolled in Florida schools, and divide it by 3,303,355, the amount of money Marco Rubio has received from the National Rifle Association. to $1.05. Is that all we're worth to these politicians? $1.05? Was $17.85 all it cost you that day, Mr. Rubio? Well, I say one life is worth more than all the guns in America.
My name is Jacqueline Corin, and I am proud to say that Parkland is my home. Parkland is the heart of this movement. But just as a heart needs blood to pump, my hometown needs the alliance of other communities to properly spread this message. We openly recognize that we are privileged individuals and would not have received as much attention if we weren't for the affluence of our city. Because of that, however, we share the stage today and forever with those who have always stared down the barrel of a gun. I actually have a special guest for you guys, so I'm gonna come bring her up.
Renee King, granddaughter of Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King. My grandfather had a dream that his 4 little children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that enough is enough. And that this should be a gun-free world, period. Will you please repeat these words after me? Spread the word! Have you heard? All across the nation. We are going to be a great generation.
Hola, buenas tardes. My name is Edna Lisbeth Chavez, and I am from South Los Angeles, California, el sur de Los Angeles. I am a 17-year-old senior at Manual Arts High School. I am a youth leader. I am a survivor. I have lived in South LA my entire life and have lost many loved ones to gun violence. This is normal. Normal to the point that I've learned to duck from bullets before I learned how to read. My brother, he was in high school when he passed away. It was a day like any other day. Sunset going down on South Central. You hear pops thinking they're fireworks. They weren't pops. You see the melanin on your brother's skin turn gray. Ricardo was his name. Can y'all say it with me? I lost more than my brother that day. I lost my hero. I also lost my mother, my sister, and myself to that trauma and that anxiety. If the bullet did not kill me, that anxiety and that trauma will. I carry that trauma everywhere I go. I carry it with me in schools, in class, walking home, and visiting loved ones. And I am not alone in this experience. For decades, my community of South Los Angeles has become accustomed to this violence. It is normal to see candles. It is normal to see posters. It is normal to see balloons. It is normal to see flowers honoring the lives of Black and brown youth that have lost their lives to a bullet. How can we cope with it when our school district has its own police department? Instead of making Black and brown students feel safe, they continue to profile and criminalize us. Instead, we should have a department specializing in restorative justice. Policymakers, listen up. Army teachers will not work. More security in our schools does not work. Zero tolerance policies do not work. They make us feel like criminals. We should feel empowered and supported in our schools. Instead of funding these policies, fund mentorship programs, mental health resources, paid internship and job opportunities.
My name is Alex Wynn. I'm a junior at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. In the wake of the tragedy on February 14th, we, as students, as youths, decided that if adults weren't going to take action, we would. No gun-related legislation has been passed in this country since 2008, 10 years ago. Since 2008, there have been at least 95 mass shootings in this country. People believe that the youth of this country are insignificant. People believe that the youths have no voice. When Joan of Arc fought back English forces, she was 17 years old. When Mozart wrote his first symphony, he was 8 years old. To those people that tell us that teenagers can't do anything, I say that we were the only people that could have made this movement possible. Together, we will use our voices to make sure that our schools, churches, movie theaters, and concerts, and our streets become safer without having them feel like prisons. If teachers start packing heat, are they going to arm our pastors, ministers, and rabbis? Are they going to arm the guy scanning tickets at the movie theater? Are they going to arm the person wearing the Mickey Mouse costume at Disney? This is what the National Rifle Association wants, and we will not stand for it.
My name is Zion Kelly, and I'm a senior at Thurgood Marshall Academy here in Washington, D.C. I'm here to represent the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of students who live every day in constant paranoia and fear on their way to and from school. At this moment, please raise your hand if you have been affected by gun violence to honor the ones you have lost. Today, I raise my hand in honor of my twin brother, Zaire Kelly. Zaire was shot on September 20th, 2017, on his way home from a competitive college counseling after-school program called College Bound. Zaire had the personality that would light up the room. He was energetic and full of dreams and aspirations. He was our team captain on the track team. He was running for student government president, and he was a youth council member. He aspired to be a forensic scientist and attend Florida A&M University for undergrad. Zaire was also the best dresser I knew with the most style. He was a person, a leader, an aspirer, not just another statistic. I was in contact with Zaire while he was walking home, texting him and calling him all through the night. About 20 to 30 minutes went by, and I became worried because the walk alone doesn't even take 30 minutes. I left my room to ask my mom where he was until I saw flashing blue and red lights outside my window. I told my parents that there were police cars and an ambulance on our street. We rushed outside, discovering that it was Zaire. That night, on September 20th, a robber with a gun was lurking on my streets for hours. On my walk home, he attempted to rob me, but I ran. Though he had an ankle monitor on, and he was supposed to be monitored by the police, he was still able to obtain a gun illegally and lurk in my streets and take my brother's life. He shot my brother in the head. Once we arrived to the hospital, he was pronounced dead. From the time we were born, we shared everything, including issues. I spent time with him every day because we went to the same school, shared the same friends, and we even shared the same room. Can you imagine how it would be to lose someone that close to you? Sadly, too many of my friends and peers can. This school year alone, my school lost 2 students to senseless gun violence, Paris Brown and my brother Zaire Kelly.
My name is Naomi, and I'm 11 years old. Me and my friend Carter led a walkout at our elementary school on the 14th. We walked out for 18 minutes, adding a minute to honor Cortland Arrington, an African-American girl who was the victim of gun violence in her school in Alabama after the Parkland shooting. I am here today to represent Cortland Arrington. I am here today to represent Hadia Pendleton. I am here today to represent Tiana Thompson, who at just 16 was shot dead in her home here in Washington, D.C. I am here today to acknowledge and represent the African-American girls whose stories don't make the front page of every national newspaper. Whose stories don't lead on the evening news. I represent the African-American women who are victims of gun violence, who are simply statistics instead of vibrant, beautiful girls that full of potential. It is my privilege to be here today. I am indeed full of privilege. My voice has been heard. I am here to acknowledge their stories, to say they matter, to say their names, because I can, and I was asked to be. For far too long, these names, these black girls and women, have been just numbers. I'm here to say never again for those girls too. I am here to say that everyone should value those girls too. That's right. People have said that I am too young to have these thoughts on my own. People have said that I am a tool of some nameless adult. It's not true. My friends and I might still be 11, and we might still be in elementary school, but we know life isn't equal for everyone, and we know what is right and wrong. We also know that we stand in the shadow of the Capitol, and we know that we have 7 short years until we too have the right to vote. So I'm here today to honor the words of Toni Morrison. If there's a book that you want to read but it hasn't been written yet, you must be the one to write it. I urge everyone here and everyone who hears my voice to join me in telling the stories that aren't told. To honor the girls, the women of color who were murdered at disproportionate rates in this nation. I urge each of you to help me write the narrative for this world and understand so that these girls and women are never forgotten. Thank you.
My name is Trevon Bosley, and I'm here with the brave youth leaders of St. Sabina, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Chicago's youth who are surrounded and affected by gun violence every day. speak for those youth who fear they may be shot while going to the gas station, the movies, the bus stop, to church, or even to and from school. I'm here to speak for those Chicago youth who feel their voices have been silenced for far too long. And I'm here to speak on behalf of everyone that believes a child getting shot and killed in Chicago or any other city is still a not acceptable norm. Most importantly, I'm here to speak on behalf of my brother Terrell Bosley, who was shot and killed while leaving church April 4, 2006. Just to give you guys a few stats from Chicago, since 2006, there have been more than 5,850 people shot and killed in Chicago. And since 2012, there have been more than 16,000 people shot. Now, let me repeat that one more time. Since 2006, there have been more than 5,850 people shot and killed in Chicago. And since 2012, there have been more than 16,000 people shot in Chicago. These stats are not just numbers in a speech. These are mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters on a societal proportion. These are lawyers, doctors, artists, musicians. And more than anything else, these are lives cut short due to senseless gun violence. I must add, though, Chicago's violence epidemic didn't start overnight. It was caused by many problems that we are still not dealing with to this day. When you have a city that feels it's more important to help pay for a college's sports complex rather than fund schools and impoverished communities, you have gun violence. When you have a city that feels we need more divvy bikes in downtown Chicago for tourists rather than more funding for workforce programs that get guys off the streets real jobs, you have gun violence. When you have an Illinois state governor, Bruce Rauner, who feels that funding anti-violence programs is, I quote, non-essential spending, you have gun violence. When you have elected officials who feel that getting a few extra dollars from the NRA is more important than their actual constituents, you have gun violence. And when you have a president that would rather constantly talk about and belittle Chicago's violence than rather than send funds and resources, you have gun violence. It's time to care about all communities equally. It's time to stop judging some communities as worthy and some communities as unworthy. It's time to stop judging youth that look like me or my brother that come from impoverished communities any different than anyone else. It's time for America to notice that everyday shootings are everyday problems.
My name is Matthew Soto. And at the age of 15, I sat in my high school Spanish class while my sister Victoria Soto was being slaughtered in her first grade classroom in Newtown, Connecticut. On December 14th, Vicky went into school to make gingerbread houses with her first grade students before their holiday break. How many of you can remember doing that? The anticipation of having to wait all week to have to be on your best behavior, but that was cut short. They didn't get to make gingerbread houses because gunfire rang out in the hallway. Too many times has gunfire been ringing out in the hallways of schools across this country. Too many schools, too many churches, too many movie theaters, too many neighborhoods, too many homes. Enough is enough. We do not have to wait for others to make us safe. We need to do it ourselves. America, I am pleading with you to realize this is not okay. We do not have to live like this. Many of the students that were in 4th grade when my sister was murdered are now freshmen in high school. 5 years ago this happened. 5 years ago, and no change has come. Today, over 400 students, teachers, and parents of Newtown families are here marching with us today.
6 minutes and 20 seconds with an AR-15, and my friend Carmen would never complain to me about piano practice. Aaron Feist would never call Kira Miss Sunshine. Alex Schachter would never walk into school with his brother Ryan. Scott Beagle would never joke around with Cameron at camp. Helen Ramsey would never hang out after school with Max. Gina Montalto would never wave to her friend Liam at lunch. Joaquin Oliver would never play basketball with Sam or Dylan. Elena Petty would never. Kara Lugren would never. Chris Hickson would never. Luke Hoyer would never. Marquine Duque Aguiano would never. Peter Wang would never. Alyssa Al-Hadaf would never. Jamie Guttenberg would never. Meadow Pollack would never.
Emma Gonzalez's silence would last for 4 minutes and 26 seconds in what's been described as the loudest silence in the history of U.S. social protest.
Since the time that I came out here, it has been 6 minutes and 20 seconds. The shooter has ceased shooting and will soon abandon his rifle, blend in with the students as they escape, and walk free for an hour before arrest. Fight for your lives before it's someone else's job.
Mass shooting survivor, 18-year-old Emma Gonzalez. We'll be back with our coverage of the March for Our Lives in a minute.
We may not yet have reached our glory, but I would gladly join the fight. And when our children tell their story, they'll tell the story of tonight. They'll tell the story of tonight.
Have you ever felt like nobody was there? Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? Have you ever felt like you could disappear? Like you could fall and no one would hear you?
Well, let that lonely feeling wash away.
All we see is light.
'Cause maybe there's a reason to believe you'll be okay. 'Cause when you don't feel strong enough to stand, you can reach out your hand and
raise a glass to freedom.
Bound Tonight, performed by Lin-Manuel Miranda and Ben Platt on the stage of the March for Our Lives. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. This historic day of action, more than 800 sibling protests around the world urging lawmakers to pass gun control. In Washington, organizers say up to 800,000 people took part in the March for Our Lives, organized by the students who survived the Valentine's Day shooting massacre at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Democracy Now! Was doing a multi-hour broadcast from the streets, speaking to young people like Natalia Rodriguez, who came up with her family from Miami.
I'm a sophomore from Miami. We all from Miami 305 representing.
A sophomore in?
Miami Springs Senior High and High School.
And what are you doing here? What does your sign say?
So we're supporting Emma. We're supporting March for Our Lives. We're here to advocate for common sense gun laws. I'm here with Students Demand Action, Miami chapter, as well as here with DC chapter.
And tell us, read us your sign and tell us.
Power to the people, but students, teachers, and women are here representing, and we're here to make change.
And you have a picture of Emma Gonzalez.
Yes, and John Lennon. And we also have different signs. Power to the students.
And why did you decide on Emma, one of the student survivors at Marjory Stoneman Douglas?
Her speech was so inspiring. I didn't know any other person that would represent what I'm advocating for more.
As a high school student, what makes you think you can change what people haven't changed in decades, and taking on one of the most powerful interests, the National Rifle Association?
I feel like the wrong thing hit in the right place this time. And I feel like students are fed up. I feel like the upcoming generation is doing what this generation isn't. and this generation of politicians isn't doing what our generation wants, and they'll listen. If not, we'll vote them out.
And do you feel like we treat violence differently in white communities and Black and Latino communities?
This has been going on in Black communities for forever, and I feel like now that it hit in a white demographic, that now politicians are listening to the students and their outspoken words because it hit where it hit, and I feel like the wrong thing hit in the right place.
So you're right next to Congress. What are you saying they should do?
We'll vote you out if you don't agree with us.
When President Trump says arm the teachers, your response?
Arm teachers with supplies. We can barely afford papers and pens, and now all of a sudden you have the money to arm teachers with guns. I think that teachers aren't paid the amount of money that they should, and now you're trying to bear them with arms. I don't think that that's a plausible way to do this. I think that that only shows how our country is going in that direction.
That is Natalia Rodriguez. Democracy Now!'s youth correspondent, Soledad Aguilar Colon from Beacon High School, a public high school here in New York, came with us to Washington, D.C. and interviewed other young people at the protest.
I'm Soledad. I'm with Democracy Now! Can you tell me your name?
My name's Alana Willinson.
Your age, please?
I'm 13 years old.
Why did you guys decide to come here today?
We decided to come here because I don't want to be scared walking into school. I want more gun reform laws, and I just want, all in all, just for people to be safe, and I want just people to live good lives. Like, this isn't the America that I wanted to grow up in. I wanted to grow up in an America with peace, not an America where kids are constantly getting killed by assault weapons.
We're known as the mass shooting generation. How do you think that this has affected our lives?
I think that that's, like, the fact that we're even known as that generation is so disgusting, and I feel that the fact that people even can hold assault weapons in this day and time is just disgusting. They're not made for hunting. They're made for actual. That's why they're called assault weapons. They're made for assaulting people.
Democracy Now! Spoke to people from all over the country. There were sibling marches in so many cities, but also many people came from, well, for example, Chicago.
Father Mike Flager from St. Sabina in Chicago.
Talk about the issue in your parish.
Well, we live in the south side of Chicago where violence is an everyday thing. We live in a trauma center, and we don't have post-traumatic stress. We have present traumatic stress. Our neighborhood is filled with balloons and teddy bears and yellow police tape and sirens and helicopters. That's the music of our community. And it's been ignored and neglected constantly over and over again. And it's a shame on Chicago. We just heard, Amy, the other day, last week, that the United States Navy medics are now sending to the Stroger Hospital in Chicago for training because it's the closest thing they can find in America to a battlefield. We should be ashamed of that. The governor, the mayor, the president, every elected official should be ashamed of that in this country. Our black and brown lives don't matter. And I'm so glad that the people from Parkland, we flew them in last week. They met with our young people for the whole day. And Tashawn and others were there. We met with them and said, we want to connect the dots. They want to connect the dots with us.
So, Father, what are you doing in your parish? This city that is a trauma center, Chicago.
Right. Well, we started about 7 years ago. We do Friday night walks every night. We hired 4 ex-gang members that work full-time on staff. We started a program called Strong Futures to take 50 at-risk youth and put them into jobs and stability. These are all people with felonies. Here's what happened. 50 people with felonies. We spent $6,500 on them. That's total in a year. And now 46 of them are working full-time jobs. It's $42,000 if they go to prison. It's $110,000 if they get shot. So people who don't care about our young people in Chicago, if for no other reason, it's a business decision to care about our young people. $6,500 is much better than $42,000. We can turn lives around. It's not that we can't end this violence. We don't have the will to end this violence because the NRA and the politicians care about themselves and care about their lily white communities and don't care about the black and brown west and south side of Chicago.
Do you feel like Parkland is helping to pierce the veil even in Chicago?
Oh, absolutely. And the Parkland students and Chicago students are united. And we want to unite with Brooklyn. We want to unite with Philly. We want to unite with South Central. Young people are doing something the adults didn't do. They're moving above race. They're moving above creed and culture and faith. They're coming together, Jews, Christians, Muslims, bonding together as young people. And you know what else young people are doing? They're impatient. They have phones. They want something, they want the answer right now. I love that about our young people. Stay impatient, because the adults have gotten used to this madness in our country. Young people fight back.
Father Mike Pfleger, and we spoke to student journalist survivors from Stoneman Douglas High School.
My name is Brianna Fisher, and I'm a sophomore from Parkland, Florida, Marjory Stoneman Douglas, and I'm a staff writer for our school newspaper, The Eagle Eye.
Hi, my name is Lainey Steinhardt, and I'm a sophomore at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. I'm also a staff writer at Eagle Eye.
I'm Zoe Gordon. I'm a sophomore at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. I'm 15 years old, and I'm also a staff writer for the Eagle Eye magazine.
So, Zoe, let's start with you on that terrible day, unbelievably enough, Valentine's Day, February 14th. The massacre at your school. You're a reporter, you're a student. Talk about where you were, your feelings, and your thoughts as a journalist.
Yeah, that was a really hard day, and it took me a couple weeks to kind of, I don't know, just feel like a little uplifted again. I know that I had to report on it as a journalist. It's important to cover what I went through so that others know and speak up for the voices that were, unfortunately, we lost that day.
That day, the day of the shooting, where were you in school?
I was in my chemistry class at the time.
And was it in the building, the freshman
building? It was
building?
not in the freshman building, but it was in the building next to it.
And when did you come to understand what was happening?
I don't think I still came to understand what's happening. It hasn't really hit me yet that it's all actually happening. You know, you hear schools like Sandy Hook and Columbine, and you never want to imagine your school on the same list as those. So I don't think it's hit any of us yet that it actually happened.
So talk about when you moved into journalism gear. I mean, you have done so much in this month. Did you all just edit the Guardian newspaper?
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing opportunity. They're amazing. They're an amazing publication, and I think it was really an honor to work alongside them through this and really show us the true side of journalism.
It's great that they're letting us use their platform and to let us speak out and share our voices, so that's not just Parkland, Florida who hears this, and that's the rest of the world.
Now, what sign are you carrying, Zoe, on this day?
I made a sign that has front and back.
Read it to us.
It says, on February 14th, I should have been studying for world history. Instead, I was praying that the shooter wouldn't come into my classroom next. And it's kind of impactful. And the other side says, here's an equation for you, love over guns. And then it says, books over bullets, number 2 pencils over AR-15s, and A's over PTSD. So both are kind of very meaningful to me and very impactful, especially the first one because it's my story. I was planning to go home that day. I was planning to skip dance so that I can study for my big AP World test the next day. I was stressed out after I finished my math lesson. I was like reaching my bag to get my world history textbook to start studying right when everything was happening. It's just so crazy.
What was it like to return to school after the mass shooting?
It actually felt somewhat nice to come back to school because you saw all this love from like the outpouring of love from the entire country, not just local schools, but from literally every single one. So I just love seeing my teachers again, and even though it's like hard going to classes where some of my classmates that unfortunately didn't make it out like they were in that class, it was hard, but it was just so nice seeing the ones that were there.
The mass shooting generation. Watch our full 4-hour special broadcast of the March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C. at democracynow.org. Happy birthday to Nermeen Sheikh. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.